Welcome to the Roundtable Consult. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Williams. And I'm joined as always by my co-host, attorney Sonia Madison. Sonia, you look like you want to say something.
I just want to fire the producer, that's all.
Or you fire the producer, you fire the host.
Rehire the same one,
Yeah, exactly.
huh? Uh, but it's all good though.
All good. Well,
All
thank you. I appreciate your moment of grace. It's always a rare sighting, but we're appreciative when it comes. What is going on with you this week? Anything exciting and new? Surely there's something exciting new in your life.
I
Oh,
mean,
okay. Well,
no, it's working. I will say, because I was thinking about this earlier this week, with again the firing of Jimmy Kimmel and just some of the stuff that's been happening, the FBI, Patel getting some of the hearings that are going on with that. And I was like, I have got to figure out a way to see the flip side of this.
oh, I thought you were going to say the forest for the trees.
No, to see the flip side. And because and I started to think, when it's kind of like that saying when they came for the black people, I didn't say anything. When they came for the Jews, I didn't say anything. And when they came for X, I didn't say anything. But then when they came for me, everyone had already been silenced. And that's why I feel like where we are. I mean, there so many times, during the campaign and from previous campaigns, there were so many people raving, hollering the red flags, and yet a certain person got elected. And then now we've got more people waving the red flag, more people, even the Republican Party, waving the red flag, and yet, Supreme Court decisions are happening. And now the rich people are feeling it. Now the Stephen Colbert's are getting fired, the Jimmy Kimmels are getting fired, and even ABC's producer, no, not producer, president is now getting some backlash. And we know that some of that is it's because we know, listen, you're speaking with your pockets, but now it's like, all right, are you really selling your soul, or is there a principle in which now is gone too far? And so that's where I'm looking like, okay, now is your turn. What are you guys gonna do?
Yeah, I think we're seeing the effects of capitalism. It boils down to it. Everybody weighs everything by the financial cost of it. When we think about capitalism, we think about making money, but the flip side to that is also what is this going to cost me to be able to do it? And I think when we measure cost in dollar and cents, which most of us in America do right now, then we make, I think, some less scrupulous decisions. I think we've totally forgotten the cost of morality. We've forgotten the cost of compassion and the cost of salvation, for that matter. These are things that we say, okay, those things are readily sacrificed because the cost of not doing this or not complying or the not cost of standing on my principles is going to the financial cost of it is going to be so exorbitant that I'm going to have to answer to other people, and those other people are going to want to have my job, and as a result, I've got to do some things that I may or may not necessarily agree with, but I do it in order to comply. Why am I complying? Is to keep those dollars rolling, and which is a sad situation. It's hard to break out of that cycle. It is hard. I understand why Jesus said it's harder for a rich man to enter into the kingdom than it is for a camel to pass through the needle of an eye of a needle. And it's got to be difficult because once you've had it, you always want to hold it. It's kind of like power. Once you've had it, you want to do everything you can do to hold on to it. Don't let it go.
Like I said, that's how you're seeing it. I'm seeing it as it's, I mean, and I get it. There now capitalism is kind of running our government. But it's always been something that's there. I mean, we've been a capitalist society well long before our time. And we've seen, again, we recognize slavery as one of the most evil sins of our country and our history.
Slavery didn't happen.
Oh, yes, right. According to these new Smithsonian rules, that's all got to be removed, right?
It never happened. Nobody
But
ever
but
got beat on their back, and
but
you
even
don't
in
see all
that,
these.
But even in that,
Yes.
like I said, even during those times as it's happening, people were turning their blind eye, despite screams, yells of people saying, "Hey, this is not only hurting me, but this is inhumane." And yet it took however many years for us to demolish that.
But
And
why did
so
it persist? Why did it persist? And frankly, why did the South not want to give it up? And they didn't want to give it up because it was financially lucrative. It was, even if you looked at it
everyone
and
has their reasons for that. I mean, I'm not disputing there's a financial benefit, but there's also a caste benefit to it. There's also, I mean, again, poor white people are voting for Trump in droves, and they're not getting any financial benefit from it. But it's the also the idea that at least I'm better than someone else. At least I have a
yeah.
better chance of getting X than someone else does. And so that's why, I mean, I'm not disputing that yours is a reason. I'm just also like, it's also down to the innately, yes, we are sinners, innately. And so now I'm looking at the rich people and saying that we're at a point where we've lost it. So now are
Are
you
you
going
including
to
yourself in the rich people? Is that what you're saying?
no, I say
When
I'm
you say
looking at the
we,
rich people.
when you say,
No, I'm
but you
saying
said
we've
we.
lost it, as in we
Oh.
are the minorities, the non-rich people. We're at a point where we're just like, my hands have been thrown in the air. I've begged, I've pleaded, but now it's hitting you. And don't come looking at me to save you because I have nothing more to give for you. I need you to step up and decide if you're going to continue to ride this train or if it's time to stop.
I think Donald Trump probably understood the power of and the influence of money more than anybody. Now he says one thing that he everything he knows more than anybody else in this world. But he knows more about the science and all the scientists, more about
Right.
the a war and strategy than all the generals and military generals. And so he very well may know more about the corruption that money produces and how manipulated people can be by money than anybody else. I will give him that credit. He might be the most knowledgeable person about that. And so he understands how to manipulate behavior and to use money to do it. Whether it's filing a lawsuit, his lawsuit that he filed in court this past week, with against New York Times was dismissed by the judge and
Yeah.
said it sounds just like I forget the word, vituperation. I was like, ooh, vituperation. I like that word. Let me look that up. I have to use that. I've heard it once before in my life, maybe, but I was like, I have to incorporate that into my lexicon of vocabulary. And so anyway, but he would dismissed it saying, this is not a real legal case, but it didn't have to be. He understood the necessity or the impact of just filing a $15 billion lawsuit against a newspaper organization. The mere fact that most of these companies don't want to be involved in litigation that's going to go on and on and on, that's still costly, even if it doesn't, even if you wind up being victorious in it, it's still costly. The whole issue about Jimmy Kimmel being fired, the conveniently, or maybe not fired, but put on an
Definitely on
indefinite
hold, right?
suspension, right? And but even that situation, he understands that if ABC has a upcoming deal, or at least the owner, the parent company of ABC, has upcoming deals that's going to require approval from the Department of Justice, this is his moment to strike. This is his moment to coerce an outcome that is favorable to him. And the minute he gets that outcome, he uses it to his political favor. Even if he doesn't get the outcome that he wants, the mere fact that he filed a $15 billion lawsuit against the New York Times got some people in his corner saying, yes, stick it to them, stick it to them. That's what they deserve. And he knows that it's frivolous. He knows it's not going to go anyplace. But what it does is it generates for him so much benefit from his people. So he understands I think the influence of dangling money, threatening money, and strong arming people with money.
I mean, no doubt about that. And he probably understood government more than we did because the fact that he knows, oh, I can use the FCC chair to just threaten to remove a license, to revoke their license. And because that's what the FCC did on one of the podcasts. And we knew that he was going to come after Jimmy Kimmel after Colbert was announced that he wasn't coming back. Donald Trump tweeted, Jimmy Kimmel, you're next, well before any of this happened. And nothing that Jimmy Kimmel said was problematic. I mean, it was true. They are using MAGA to, or using Charlie Kirk's death to incite MAGA.
It's just on a side note, he said what the governor of of Utah said. I'm praying that I spent 33 hours praying that it wasn't one of us. That's what Jimmy Kimmel said. Jimmy Kimmel said, they were doing everything in their power to convince themselves that it was not one of them. But Jimmy Kimmel got in trouble for it. The governor, everybody's like, yes, thank God he was praying. you know he was praying. He said he was praying. So maybe Jimmy should have opened up his mouth and said, I was praying that the Republicans wouldn't use it this way, or MAGA world wouldn't use it. But
um,
you said
but I
something really
go ahead,
interesting to
sorry.
me. You said he probably knew more about government than most of us, which
I
is
mean, he's knowing
interesting.
to use these entities, and were they being used more? I'm like, they have ever been used before.
Yeah, and you would never thought of it. You would never have thought of to grab Yale by the testicles, and or whatever genitalia you prefer to reference. Uh, you would never thought that he would thought to go after Columbia and them by saying, "Hey, well, if we withhold your research dollars, then we can get conformity out of you." Who thinks to do that kind of stuff? We start to see just how we just start to see. I've learned under the presidency of Donald Trump, just how entangled the federal government is with corporate America and our educational institutions. And I don't think I'm the only one who learned that lesson. And maybe that was the cry of a lot of conservatives. And it certainly was the cry of a lot of conservatives. So they probably knew this for years to say, hey, the government is funding way too many other things. And, Donald Trump just happened to say, you know what, if we're going to do it, we might as well use it to our advantage. We can manipulate you and we can bribe you, coerce you to comply with what we want you to comply with. And so it was an economics, governmental, constitutional lessons. We're learning all kinds of things from Donald Trump.
All kind of ways have of humans still making a way to make something that seemingly is supposed to be a perfect system imperfect. But with that, and this is kind of going along with our topic, I don't know if we have ever gotten to this place where now we truly just feel, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but I do feel like a lot of people truly just feel hopeless because again, we're coming to the realization that man, corporate America is so entangled into the government. AI is taking over jobs. When we see the unemployment rate is rising, and yet, yes, those federal interest rates are getting cut, but yet still people are don't have the jobs. We're
One
not
thing has
teaching
something to do with
people.
the other, by the way. The fact that the job losses are going up inspires the Fed to lower the rates. But yeah, okay.
But yeah, but again, that's only going to benefit the people who have the resources. So I get to be, it's like the smarter we're becoming, the more hopeless we're also becoming. And so I don't know if I was reading an article right before we started, but one of these professors were saying, I think at New York University was saying, we've always had to work hard. Oh, for generations, we've had to work hard. And you and I, we talk to our parents, and we know how much they struggle working on a farm, especially during the civil rights movement, segregation, and the like. So hard work has never been an issue, and even in capitalism, to some degree, there is this, I guess, understanding that the only way you do well is if you work hard at something so that you can buy a certain house or drive a certain car. But now this new generation, they're just like, but I don't feel like working hard gets me the reward that I thought it would before. And so they're not as hopeful.
Hmm. I think one of the things that destroys hope is information. because the more information you get, the less hopeful you become, I think a lot of times. And it's counterintuitive because you start when you the more evil that you start to see that's placed before your face and the more constriction and constrainment that you have, you start to realize more of what you don't have. I go back all the way to the Garden of Eden. I think the biggest downfall of man was his quest for information that he was never intended to know. God, when we put man in the middle of the garden, he said, you can eat of everything in this garden. Everything is good. There's one thing that you can't do. You can't eat of this tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It wasn't that he didn't want us to know what good was. He didn't want us to know what evil was. And what happens is that the more we start to discern and get to perceive evil around us, the more hopeless we become because evil is really prevalent. There's another scripture that says that wickedness would increase and the hearts of men will grow cold. And he's talking about as we go toward the end day. And I think one of the catalysts for that is going to be our ability to see the evil that is around us, not just to see the evil. When we see that the opportunity that other people have, and then we say that we don't have it as well. When we were during the times of slavery, and Charlie Kirk made this comment, he was like, "Well, back in the days before Jim Crow or before civil rights, what happened was blacks were committing less crime because they had less opportunity. They had less, they were happier than whatever. So I can't remember his exact quote, but that was the essence of it because he said they committed less crimes back then. And so we should go back to that time. And that was his implication. No, the implication, the reason why probably less crime was committed was because we had less freedoms. And now that you have more freedoms, you got the freedom to commit more crimes, unfortunately. And you also have more access to information where you couldn't read before. If you can't read, then you don't have access to information. You learn to read, then you start realizing, hey, there are opportunities out there for me that I'd like to get. And then you find out that there are people who don't want you to get that information. You remember when we did the reunion, and one of the things that shocked me was when we were talking to our aunts and uncles, and they were like, racism wasn't a problem for us. We knew to stay on our side, and they stayed on their side. The problem only came when we started wanting what they had. And as long as you are oblivious to what somebody else has, then you learn to be content almost with what you have within the constraints of what you have. If you look at, that's why I think the immigration problem is never going to be resolved, just because as long as other countries are struggling and they look at prosperous countries like the United States and say, why can't I have what they have? Because it's in front of their face with social media and everything more now than ever before. And so people start saying, well, other people have these things, have a better life than I have. Young children today start looking at people on YouTube, all of these YouTube multimillionaires and social media influencers who are living lavish lives. And they look and say, look at what they have and look at what I have. I'm hopeless. I don't have any way. I don't see any mechanism whereby I can attain what they have. And I think what that does, and some people, a small minority of people, it generates a sense of motivation. But I think for the majority, it probably discourages and says, I'll never be able to get that. I don't have opportunities. I don't come from where they came from. I'll never be able to get it. And it, I think, inspires a hopelessness that you seem to be sensing right now.
Well, and I do think it depends on the purpose. I do want to say, from my impression of that reunion conversation, it wasn't that racism wasn't a problem for us. It was, hey, no, we recognize racism. We recognize we are here because we're Black, and there was even a perception that white people were better, but it just wasn't something that was constantly in our face because we were segregated, and therefore, like you said, aren't seeing how much better they are living than we are. But there was they did recognize racism. I don't want to put the perception that they didn't realize racism exists.
And
Uh,
I didn't put it out there like that. Yeah.
but to me, part of the fallacy a little bit is at the same time, once they were able to see more, they also ascribe. I mean, we're in a better position because they ascribed for something better. So I don't want to bring the notion that your pursuit of something better may be your downfall. Because I do think it's one thing to pursue knowledge of good information or knowledge of even as we talk about maturity in Christianity, sometimes the more you read and study, the more humble you become. And that's something that could be positive. But I do understand your point about, but when you are saturated, and this is where we are, at least right now, saturated with so much evil, particularly through social media, and as we're seeing, with this government, because it's even the news, it's hard to understand. Are they doing any good up there? Or is this just bickering constantly in the congressional hearings? Is it just reading Supreme Court decisions where now we've got justices bickering amongst each other? And so it's hard to find some of that goodness that people often had growing up without having all this in their face because they saw it a lot in their families. They saw it a lot in their relationships that they had. Because even now, marriages are getting torn apart. People don't even want to be married anymore. And that used to be something people wanted generations ago. People don't want children, and definitely not as many, but women are not having children at the same rate as they previously were. And I'm sure some people may blame that on contraceptives, but I also think some people, again, have the knowledge of, man, do I want to bring a child into a world where not only they are going to be saturated with information that they're not equipped to handle yet, but also I am being told that I have to change it. I know I sound like a conservative here, but I've been told
I
exactly
was
what
just sitting there thinking
information
like you sound
you
so
have to
much
teach
like
them.
Charlie Kirk.
Oh, don't sound like Charlie Kirk. Now, don't say that.
You're
That
like
is,
people used to want
don't
to get
sound like
married. People
that.
used to,
I will
that's the
never
essence of
say slavery was
happiness.
good because Black people weren't committing crime. And I was also going to say, even to that point, white people were committing crime. We just define crime differently. Charlie Kirk doesn't think beating a Black person is a crime, where I would say, yes, it is, just because there was no law for it. And if your political system, or if your laws are systemically racist, then yes, Black people are going to lose every time. But don't say I sound like Charlie Kirk. Now I will give you, I may sound like a
I'm just
conservative,
saying
but I'm not
it
gonna
was
say I sound like Charlie Kirk.
you were just repeating some of his things about how the essence of life is found in, a woman getting married and having
I did not
children.
say any of that. Don't put words in my mouth. I
I didn't
said
say you
women aren't
said it. I
having
said you were
children like they used
sounding
to.
I said you were
But those are
sounding
just
like
facts.
him. Those were his words. But yeah,
But those were not my words. That's why
I get it. I get it. That's
viewers,
why I said
please let me say,
your words were
women,
sounding like
you are
his.
not defined by your ability or lack of desire to have children. But I'm just saying, for some women, it's not the I don't want to have a child. It's a one, I don't want to do it alone, and two, I don't know if I can raise the child to be a productive member of society, which would be more so my desire. Um, and so that's really the point I'm making, is it's not, taking away your choice. But I say again all that to say, I agree that the knowledge of the evil is what's hurting us. And you often tie it with Adam, and I'm glad you said the downfall of man, and how his fault
Mankind.
was his
Yeah.
pursuit of evil, and not trying to put that on Eve. But I look often at Solomon. I mean, this is a wise man. He's the wisest, and yet was the one that destroyed the kingdom. It was its pursuit of
Women.
everything, of everything God told him not to do.
Now he never told us not to
That
pursue a
called, and
woman.
yet he had all this incredibly wealth of knowledge, and we know he also was the richest, most richest. What I mean, so it was not pursuing money per se. He had all that, is pursuing trying to understand other cultures, trying to bring in other gods into his fold, that caused the downfall again of what was supposed to be God's kingdom.
Yeah. I think you made me think about something. I heard something. This is just a side note, and I really didn't like it when I heard it this morning. And it was they were talking about how Barack Obama, when he was president, all the insults that were thrown at him. And the one that they kept emphasizing was like they called him Muslim. I was like, oh wow, that's like the absolute worst thing that you could be called in America is Muslim. Oh, and I thought I said if I were a Muslim, how would I feel about listening to that type of situation, that type of rhetoric when they're like, well, this America who says that they embrace people and freedom of religion, they embrace everybody but me. And that would inspire some hopelessness in me. But I think what happens in terms of us perceiving the evil, it's not just that the evil is so pervasive. It's that we have an appetite to see the evil. I was saying even about Charlie Kirk. I think Charlie Kirk could have done a lot of good if he had really stuck to the gospel message, preaching the gospel and keeping it just at that. Don't add into it the politics, and even if you did add in, first of all, I don't think that you should add in politics with your religious speak anyway, because the Bible says that a good soldier doesn't entangle himself in civilian matters. So I don't think we should conflate the gospel message with any political affiliation in the first place. But if he did, even if he did, if he toned down some of the rhetoric of what he said, then he probably would have been less a divisive figure. So the question is, why didn't he turn down the rhetoric? Why do you keep throwing out these zingers here that you know are going to be offensive to people? And that's because it's the lure of social media. Kind-hearted, meek, gentle statements like that just don't go viral. They just don't, and they don't recruit followers. What does recruit followers? The zingers, the hateful things. I'm like, I can't believe they said that. How many times did that video go viral? But that of him getting shot with the gory video, just blood gushing from it. It looked unreal. But that's what people are drawn to. People are drawn to evil naturally, and so or drawn to the hateful or to the vitriolic. And so you get it involved with you realize that you get rewarded when you advance these things. I heard somebody say something about the Democrats this past week who got arrested standing outside the for protesting outside of the ICE facility. I think it was in New York. I can't remember where it was. But they were saying all they want is that clickbait. All they want, all these politicians, all they want is that moment, that clip that can go viral for them to help them to raise funds. Well, we evil is rewarding people. It rewarded Charlie Kirk by him saying some very vile things. People watched his videos, it drew attention to him. He gained more followers. And unfortunately, some of those followers were the ones who actually said, "Yeah, I believe the same thing." That black guy up there that deserved to die, he was a scumbag. He needed to have two knees on his neck and not just one. I'm just exaggerating right here, but I'm sure there were some people who had that sentiment as well. Um, but we're just drawn to the evil. And once it wasn't just that we wanted to know that it existed, we want to witness it. We want to see how other people are impacted by it. We don't ever want to see how we're impacted by it, but to watch somebody else impacted by evil, we're intrigued by it. And I don't know. I think it's just an innate characteristic or an innate flaw of man is that we're just drawn to evil. And I send it back to our basic nature, and that is entropy. Entropy in science is this thing called atoms favor a state of disorder. In order for two atoms to stay close together, it takes energy to keep them together. So they rather be in chaos. And because the atom is the basic unit of all matter, basically, including us humans. So we favor a state of disorder. And unless we expend the energy necessary to constrain that energy, we will devolve into a chaotic society.
Well, we are natural born sinners. So yes, that is our natural tendency is to sin. No, not disputing there. Of course, I'm going to dispute anything about, oh, Charlie Kirk could have done some good if he stuck to the gospel. One, I don't even know what gospel you're talking about that he ever preached. But I'm also would argue that again, if you are
Jesus loves you.
you said you need to put that somewhere because I don't know where he's ever said that. But I do know he has said that Black women are taking white people's jobs. So if you're going to speak that Right. And I do believe that he believes that. I mean, you can say, oh, he was just saying that because he wanted to have clickbait. Or same thing that people will say about Donald Trump. Oh, he doesn't really mean that. He's just saying that to garner votes. No, they really do mean it. And I don't think if you do really mean that, that I'm going to say, oh, you could do some good in the world. No, because inherently you mean that certain people are bad or certain people are oppressing others. And so
But even if you did believe that, even if you did believe that and it was not rewarded when you said it, then you would stop saying it. But if you only
maybe
marginally
or maybe
believed it,
not.
but if
Maybe
you
or maybe
only
not.
marginally, okay, but if you only marginally believed it, well, even if you didn't, if you weren't rewarded by it, you would not have gained in favor. So you would not have had the influence that you had. But even if at the beginning you marginally believed it and you tested the waters and you found that it was positively reinforced, then you become more and more committed to it. So I don't know. I don't know whether he believed it or not. I'm not going to make a comment on to whether or not he believed it. But one thing I do know is that it helped gain followers for him. It did gain him some notoriety and celebrity as well. And if he had just, and I don't believe that if he had just preached just a gospel message, that he would have gotten nearly the amount of celebrity that he got right now, because we got preachers all over the country who are preaching the gospel day in and day out. And,
And some
they
of
don't
them
have,
are extremely successful. I mean, Jesus did that, and we see how he was extremely successful. We had the disciples writing letters in jail, and yet we still read them to this day. And so I don't want to put this notion that if you are only trying to do good, you won't be rewarded. Yes, you will. Now, whether it's financial, I don't know. Whether it is through notoriety, I don't know. But there is reward in doing good. There is reward
absolutely.
in preaching gospel. Mother Teresa, we still talk about all the good that she's done. There is celebrity in doing good. And so I don't want to put this notion out that, oh, if you're only going to stick to the Bible, you're not going to have influence. No, there are people that do that and have been widely successu
Oh, I don't dispute that. I don't, and I don't want anybody to think that that was what I was saying, because obviously you think that.
I just want to make sure
but
it's clear.
but you misconstrue a lot of things though. But the point that I'm making is that you gain more. People say you catch more flies with honey than vinegar, but it seems like you draw more humans with the vinegar than with the honey, because it's like when you what we want to see the drama. We want the reality television shows, I mean, you of course you're not going to watch a reality television show if it's not laden with the drama, but that's what we're drawn to. And I think again that just fosters and feeds the hopelessness that we have in society. It's bad even when you can't even find hope in the church anymore. And that's the part that concerns me. And that's why the struggle is real. Because when you have identified the church as the enemy, and that didn't just happen because you were preaching the gospel. It happened because you were doing something else. If you say Jesus loves you and Jesus wants to make your life better and erase all of your pains, you don't generate enemies by saying that. So there's something else that we're saying and or doing that is making the church inimical. And so what happens is that when it comes to the point where people are looking for hope in the world, where they should be able to turn to is the church. But they can't turn to the church right now because the church is now politicized. Because the church is becomes now, hey, you must belong to the Republican Party, the people who've been trying to oppress me, and the people who've been trying to limit my freedoms, the people who've been slandering my religion itself. You must belong to that Republican Party. So I don't want any parts of that church. I think people will begin to reject Christ, not because they're rejecting his love, but that because they're rejecting the affiliation with Christ that has been represented in this society. And that's the political affiliation.
Oh, it sounds like you're saying that there is no hope. I did want to defend my drama comment because one, I don't know how you define drama, but conflict is not always bad. And I think we've talked about this before, how sometimes conflict can get you into a much better result, a much better position, and it can become introspective. And so just caveat there, drama does not necessarily equal negativity, but you do have to have that discernment. And as you kind of
Mhm.
pointed out earlier, sometimes that discernment requires you to understand evil. And the more you pursue evil, the more you begin to lose hope. So I'm asking you, are you saying that we are in a country, a world in which hope is lost? There is no hope.
I think that there is, well, when there's no truth, there can also be no hope as well. And so I think we're losing confidence in truth. And as a result, where people are becoming hopeless. Well, what do I believe at this point? You know, how do I even trust what you're telling me? So yeah, I do think that there still needs to be I think there's time for correction. I do think that what needs to happen is that the true body of Christ, the true Christ followers, need to be a bit more vocal. We've allowed the salt substitute to be lot louder than we are. And I'm using an analogy. The Bible says that we're the salt of the earth, and if the salt loses its savor, wherewith will it be salted? So if the salt loses its savor, if we're no longer effective at changing those things that we come in contact with, that's what salt does. It changes the character of the anything that it comes in contact with. It preserves, it heals. Sometimes if you have a wound, sometimes they say you put salt in that wound, it will actually heal it. This is what the church is supposed to be doing. It's supposed to be preserving, supposed to be changing the character of. It's supposed to be healing the hurts that's in the world. But the salt is losing its savor because it's being represented by salt substitute. And that's the people who scream the loudest and say, hey, we are the representatives and the ambassadors of God in this earth. We're the ones who are standing for truth, and all those Democrats over there, they're just standing for evil. So they're making clear a battle between what is good and what is evil, and they're drawing them along party lines. And one of the things that was most apparent to me this past week when we started seeing after the death of Charlie Kirk, it was interesting that right before they knew anything about who the killer was, they said the radical left Democrats are responsible for this. Nancy Mace jumped, President Trump said it. Nancy Mace jumped on and said, the Dems have to own this one before they even knew who did it. First of all, the guy was not even captured. And the second, he came up in a conservative family, very much
Very
MAGA,
Republican family.
very MAGA. And then third, he was registered as an independent. But the Dems need to own it. But this was the narrative that you started. One of the things I think that was curious, well, since then, they've been advancing this narrative, say, see how demonic the Democrats are? They've already been building the foundation for that before. See how demonic the Democrats are. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples why they say that. Um, but curiously, what you didn't realize is that 1 or 2 days after the shooting of Charlie Kirk, when they started advancing this narrative, the Trump administration removed from the Department of Justice a report that showed quite clearly that most political violence over since 1975, I think it was committed by far right extremists, not far left extremists. It was something like 462 to 78 or something like that. I don't
And we
those
had
may not be
already
the
been told that white supremacist groups are the most domestic terrorists. And so that information had already been out there, but yes, they definitely took it off the website. Right. It's
why? Because
reason.
it contradicts the narrative that they're trying to advance. And so you seen any this past week? Have you seen any of these posts of people celebrating Charlie Kirk's death?
Of course not. And I'm not
Neither have
looking for
I.
them. But no, I have not seen anyone applauding for his death.
But you may not be on social media as much as I am.
Yeah, you're right.
TikTok, and I don't spend a lot of time on it, but it should at least at some point come up in your feed. TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. I have yet to see a single post about it, but I've seen dozens of posts about from other Christians, conservative Christians, uh, Republicans saying this is just disgusting. So many people are out there, so many of these Democrats are out there celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk. This is demonic. This is the reason why I left the Democratic Party and I'm now becoming a Republican. I've seen so many of those videos there. And I'm thinking like, Well, where are you seeing those videos? Because I haven't seen any of them. I haven't seen a single one of them. So maybe you're hanging out on some dark website or whatever. Maybe some other foreign actor is polluting your feeds with a bunch of information. Maybe deep fake videos, maybe AI generated comments or whatever. I don't know. At this point, you don't know what to believe, but you got a narrative that's being perpetuated right now by a group of people that says Democrats are evil because they're celebrating the death of a man. And I have yet to see a Democrat. I have yet to know a Democrat who celebrates it. Everyone that I've seen, I've said, this is a tragic thing that happened for him. My prayers go out to the families. To his family and to his children. I'm sympathetic for them, but I will not allow you to lionize this man. I'm going to still tell the truth
But
about
he's
who he
not a
was.
martyr.
Yeah, he is not a martyr. And so,
Despite
but
how much Mark thinks he could have done good.
yeah, he could have. We all could do good if we just stick to preaching the gospel. We all could do it. The problem that we have is when we start adding other agendas to the gospel. The gospel is sufficient to stand on its own. God does not need a man's law to enhance, augment, or to help facilitate the power of his. His is sovereign alone. But I digress on that one. But the point that I was trying to make was that there's a narrative that's being advanced out there and a very strategic narrative that's being advanced. And that is to say, we are now delineating the bounds of evil versus good along political lines. And they are doing everything that they can do to do it by removing information that speaks to the contrary, by repeating the same thing by political leaders, having a unified message on that. And then I think also by even feeding in deep fake videos and AI generated comments and things of that nature, that and feeding them specifically to the algorithms of people who would hear it, because they're not giving it to they're not feeding those to the people who would reject it. Because I don't know any liberals or any Democrats who have seen a single one of these things. Why are we not seeing those? The algorithms are set up to be able to incite and to invigorate, motivate those people who would be influenced by this type of thing.
Well, I would caution people, even if you think you're seeing it, you still may not be. It could be AI generated because I've been doing a lot of just tutorials on just how much AI is being used in commercials, is being used in social media. I mean, we see that Donald Trump gets fooled by AI all the time when he, tries to say something is real or isn't. And so, you should question what you're seeing. I will say, when you were talking, it also made me think when you are constantly poking a bear and then surprised when there's a reaction, but then throw your hands and say, well, I didn't, you see, I didn't even do anything. And going back to your, commentating on Charlie Kirk saying, oh, you see, these Black people were committing crimes once they were free. When you have constantly belittled, beaten, separated, killed a group of people, and then they go in uproar and react, and you use that to say, see, I told you they're bad. I mean, I don't, that to me also is like gaslighting. You're being disingenuous, but you're also trying to create this narrative. And I know oftentimes we say, hey, particularly in the Black community, we say, don't take the bait because they will bait you. Don't take the bait, and and every good that you do will be obliterated as soon as you take the bait. I do see that is often what's happening in this movement, this conservative movement. Hey, I'm gonna say that Black people are taking their jobs, or I'm gonna say that, hey, farmers are being benefited by Black farmers more than white farmers. I'm gonna put out this DEI and keep poking until someone gets upset. Or I'm gonna say guns are great, and we're gonna see the mass shootings, and we're gonna see, but no, it's guns are great. We got to get more guns until someone gets upset. And again, not justifying it, because again, we're taught you cannot allow someone else to dictate how you move. We know that. But I'm also saying we've got to be clear on what's happening too. So you are being baited. Do not take the
Mhm.
bait. But I also want to do a quick criticism, and I don't know what your thoughts are on Kamala Harris doing this book. And again, I haven't read it. I've just seen some of the commentary or some of the excerpts. But because again, you talked about how the Republican Party, the conservatives, they're all banding together for this message. That's not true. No one is out here celebrating Charlie Kirk's death. Not true. But yet they have banned on this message to even a point is as it banning on, hey, Jimmy Kimmel should have been suspended. And you're like, are you serious? I thought free speech was what you guys were about, but now let's band together on here. But now we've got the Democrats just continuing to show that they have no unified message. They're continuing to poke holes or poke fingers at each other. I mean, what are your thoughts?
I think she realizes that her political career is over, and so she's like, "I need to sell some books right here, and I'm going to be set for a while."
But I'm
And
also
this is and
your,
this is the
your
way
career
this is
could
the way
not
that I
even be
sell books.
over.
This is where you sell books. You spill the tea. This is what everybody wants. This is what we've been talking about all morning. Is that people want the salacious, and if you give them salacious, they will buy the book, and you will benefit from it. At what cost? Well, here comes the other costs. I mean, the only ones that we're thinking about is the financial cost of it, or the financial benefit of it. But it does come with a cost of reputation. It does potentially come at a cost of alienating, or making the or demonizing the Democratic Party even further, and basically helping to advance the Republican cause.
But I would also add that it takes away from accountability. You were the face of your election. If you're going to sit here and put in your book that, oh, I wanted Pete Buttigieg, but I decided that he would be too risky, or oh, Biden should have never did X, or never it should never been on Biden to make that decision about running again, or the reason I said what I said on The View was because I was trying not to, get demonize Biden or whatever with Biden, but I should have said X. And some of the other stuff that keeps coming out. And I'm just like, you're not taking any accountability. You are the face. You either say, no, this is the person I want and this is who we're going with. You take the risk of your own decisions,
Hmm.
or
Look,
you don't come out and blame everyone else because you didn't win.
I don't know that you can say that she's blaming them based off of this sound bites.
That's
You
what I said. I
can,
haven't read it.
I
I put
think,
that
I
caveat.
think,
I have
I
not read
think, and I'm hopeful. See, some of us still have hope. Uh,
it.
some of us still have hope, and so I'm hopeful that she will say, "Hey, listen, this is what was going on in my mind at the time. I've got a lot of other advisors, and everybody's telling me X, Y, or Z. I really would like to run with Pete Buttigieg, and the only reason why I wouldn't is because I know how the American people would do it, and so this was part of my decision making. I did. I know that I probably should have distanced myself from Joe Biden, but Joe Biden has been good to me. And I don't know if this is what she's saying, but Joe Biden has been good to
Okay,
me,
you're
and
hopeful
I
that that's
couldn't.
what she's saying.
And right, and I couldn't in good conscience, throw him under the bus underneath of this. I appreciated his nomination and his confidence in me being doing that. And so I could not do this. And so there are a lot of other things that can be peppered around those little click moments, those click bite moments, and those little clips that they get people going, that could explain a lot of other things. And I think she has a right to tell her story and to say, hey, this is what was going on in my mind at this time. I maybe she does take some accountability. Maybe she says I could have done some things differently. She does say I could have distanced myself from Joe Biden sooner. And should have. And so, but
But again, I'm not disputing that she doesn't have a right. I mean, hopefully no one is hearing me say that. I'm just saying if this book is not taking any accountability for herself, then I'm with you. You're messing up your integrity. You're only doing this for money and you're causing more harm than good. But if she is doing exactly what you just laid out, I think that would help her career because to me, it's not only showing an honest introspective, but then I would have some hope that so then you wouldn't make the same mistake twice versus, oh, it's everyone else's fault but my own. And sometimes we see that. I don't like it when even Trump's administration did that. When they would get fired and then write a book. No, you had an opportunity to make some change and you didn't. Don't try to come in now and explain to me why the administration is corrupt. We already knew that before you decided to join. But if you didn't do what you needed to do then, if you kept going along And then once you finally, maybe said no, get fired, I don't need your book. And again, it doesn't mean that you don't have a right to write it. I'm not disputing any of that. I'm just saying
I
I
don't
I
know it.
don't like
Yeah.
it.
Well, the other part is, and to the point of our topic still, do you think her book would be selling right now if she had talked about only the flowery things? If they released the clips that were, or the little quotes or segments that were
But
dealing
it's
only
back
with
to
the
your earlier
flowery?
point. What is your point? If your point is just to sell books, then I'm probably not going to be too much interested anyways. But if your point is, listen, I am trying to encourage change in my party. I'm trying to let you guys know, hey, I take some accountability as to maybe why my campaign didn't run the way I did, or hey, let me show you what I have seen out in these streets as I campaign so that we've got documents of, or at least something in writing as to what some of the interests of the people are. Great. Love it. Let's read it. But if you're just like, oh, I just wrote this to sell books, and I know that selling
I
books
mean,
requires salacious material, so I just did
yeah,
that. I'm
most
not
people
interested.
write books. Most people who write books have an expectation of selling them, and
Not
then they know,
everyone. I don't even, because
yeah.
I would argue most people that write books aren't selling
I'm,
at
s- I'm
high
saying they
volume.
have an expected. I said they have an expectation of
But I
selling
don't
them,
even think that they expect it.
and so and when they write books, they say, okay, what content do I need to put in here to make sure that it's appealing to people? I write books just to educate people, and so I know
You're
that.
like, but not me. Most people, but not me.
Yeah, I do, but I still have an expectation of selling it. I still have an expectation of selling. And so even as I'm writing, I'm considering, how are people going to respond to this? People aren't going to just be able to sit down and read this and be like, oh, this was a lovely book to read. No, they're going to have to. This was like a textbook, And so I'm like, I know it's not going to sell as many that way, but I want to get the information out there. I want the information to be there. But it's still again about what narrative you're trying to put out there, and that's what her publicity people right now are trying to put out. Hey, she's spilling the tea because that sells. I was thinking about another narrative because you were talking about how strategic sometimes those narratives are put out there. I'm going to give this example. If you were the bank manager, one of your bank tellers consistently lost, let's say, lost $8,640. And then another one of your bank tellers lost, um, well, let's say $8,640, and they have 83 clients, 87 clients. No, 68 clients, right? Let's say
I was
68
gonna say
clients.
time is limited. Do you really want to do this math problem? Or you might want to just get to your point.
Okay, I have to include the math. Let's say your one bank teller has about 68 clients that come in and they're $8,600 short, right? And then you have another client who has, 13 clients, another teller who has 13 clients and they're $6,000 off. So one guy's lost 8,600, another person lost 6,400. What do you address? Which one do you address? Which one gets your highest priority?
Why does it be either or? I can't address both.
Oh, good question. So one of them you address both of them because you lost the money on them. So the reason why I chose those numbers was because in 2023 there were 17,000 deaths that were committed in America. 8,600 or so of those were committed by white people. 6,400 of those were committed by black people. Granted, the percentage of black people and the prevalence of black perpetrators is higher. But if you're really interested in cutting down the number of deaths, then you go for where's the highest population of people being killed. You don't look at where's the highest percentage of people being killed. You look at who's killing the most people, and how do we then stop the biggest people from failing? I mean, from killing more people. What do we do to intervene on these? We never hear anything about preventing white on white crime, like has happened with Charlie Kirk. We don't hear about that. We hear a lot about preventing black on black crime, but even still, there's fewer murders committed by black people than Americans. Now, I understand we disproportionately represent, a smaller portion. We disproportionately represent the number of perpetrators. But if your focus really was cutting down the number of deaths, then you'd also would be focusing on the highest perpetrators of those, but you don't. And the reason why is because it's so much more convenient to advance a narrative that black people are the ones who are dangerous for you. Black people are the ones who are murderers in this country. When the reality is, if you go back and look at all these political violence, people committed political violence, they're all white. They're not black people. These are white people. But it helps to advance that narrative that so many people actually like to including Charlie Kirk like to talk about. Black on black crime really occurs about the same rate statistically as white on white crime occurs as well. They kill about 89% of all murders are probably, I mean, 81% of all murders, black people murders are killed by black people, and about 79% of all white murders are committed by white people. We kill those people we're in greater proximity to. But if the narrative is changed, you start talking about the percentage wise, then we can help advance one that's much more derogatory and diminishes black people. And that's the narrative I think that's likely to be advanced more often in American society.
Well, and that's why, again, going back to our topic, that's why we lose hope. Because even if you wanted to push that out for the sake of improving violence in the Black community, we would have a different conversation. But you're wanting to push that out to demonize and pretty much victimize a group of people for your own benefit. And so then that's why
Yeah,
then we're like, well, where's the hope? Because yeah, you can tell me issues all day long, but if your whole point in telling me the issue is just so you can point a finger at someone else other than you,
yeah.
then where's the hope?
In fact, the hopelessness is one of the things that contributes to the murders and to the violence. If you start looking at, there's 20, I read something in 2021 was one of the statistics that I read. 20% of black people live below the poverty line. 20% of black Americans today still live below the poverty line. Why is the black unemployment rate always two times the unemployment rate of white people? Why is that? Why is the racial wealth gap still an issue today? You create a situation of hopelessness, and people commit crimes when they are more hopeless. You actually look at the crime statistics, you'll see the lower socioeconomic status. uh, there's a direct correlation with lower socioeconomic status and the commission of crimes, particularly violent crimes. It occurs more commonly in the lower socioeconomic classes. If you have a population of people that you preferentially relegate to that lower socioeconomic class by your systemic racism and systemic oppressions, or whatever you want to, however you want to describe it, or lack of opportunities, or lack of education, lack of good school system, lack of provision of resources within that community, you create an environment that helps to perpetuate the level of hopelessness that advances crime. And then you say, okay, the problem is that black people just need to be in bondage again.
Right, because then your solution, again, if you're only doing is to demonize a group of people, what you're then saying is the solution is mass incarceration or mass deportation, or again,
Or let's
all the
reinstitute
stuff,
slavery.
right? Where they were becoming skilled workers, right? That's slavery helped Black people become skilled workers. Um, but yeah, I mean,
Struggle is
I feel
real.
like we're ending this podcast affirming that hope is not there. And like I said,
There's a paucity of hope.
you wonder why people don't want to have children at the same rate as before. Because
Well, there is still hope in Jesus. We still have to. There's a remnant of us.
that
There's a
is true.
remnant of us
That
who
is true.
actually still believe in the unadulterated gospel of Jesus Christ, and who will not pollute that gospel by affixing it to a political goal or any other monetary goals or anything else. We just need to have our voice to be amplified much louder than the salt substitute, I think.
And with that, we do not put or do not use hope to be synonymous with success or money, something that is material or earthly. Because
Amen.
again, if we're going to put our peace, our hope in Jesus Christ, then we've got to let go of how we see that come into fruition or what that then looks like in terms of success on earth.
Yes.
All right. Well, with that agreement, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you guys have been commenting because, again, if we see how positive or some of the feedback you're giving us gives us hope, then it also then helps, again, spread that hope along to others. You can catch a repeat of this episode on YouTube, Star Radio, KD Live. You can also follow us on your favorite podcast platform, as well as right here on Facebook. So until next Saturday, thank you guys so much for tuning in.